Hello, and thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. My name is Nathan Nordine. I am a hospice chaplain for Genesis, and we have offices at the Morrison House, which is by what used to be a Good Sam. Today I'm sharing with you some ideas that I'm actually putting together for my doctoral work to get a doctorate of theology, and I'll try to not make it too academic or heavy, but it's a subject that's near and dear to my heart. How to guard yourself, protect yourself from succumbing to despondency, which is like sadness that won't give up or relent. And we don't want that to happen to you during this time or any time or anyone else. And I'll be referencing some Christian scriptures and what have you, but whether you're of faith or no faith at all, we welcome you to this topic because we want what's best for you. The book, What's So Funny About God, is what I'll start with actually, by Steve Wilkins. And he reminds us that back in the Middle Ages, Easter used to be a time of laughter, and probably still is, because it was such a surprise. On Good Friday, Jesus died, and on Easter he rose again, and we'll be talking more about laughter later. Another book I recommend is called Theology, Comedy, and Politics by Marcus Pound. And Pound talks about Kierkegaard, who's a heavy hitter, who talks about if you're going to have humor, you need to be a knight of faith, not a knight of resignation. So faith is important, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Kierkegaard says, the knight of faith experiences the kind of joy in which the infinite shines through the ordinariness of life. If the knight of infinite resignation renders love impossible, the knight of faith radicalizes that impossibility. Love is possible by virtue of the impossible. Now, the main book I'll be looking at during this video is by Angela Tilby. She talks about what's historically called the 7 deadly sins, and this is where we'll get into how to guard against despondency. She's talking about a 4th century monk who taught his monks how to save themselves from despondency while they were isolated. Well, for many years we haven't been able to relate to those monks because we haven't been isolated. But now, since COVID and social media, many of us live very isolated lives. Here's what he has to say, or what she has to say in her book, Angela Tilby. A vagaries inclusion of sadness may at first glance seem to be unreasonable. Everyone is sad at some time or another, and that's good. We would think a person abnormal who never felt sadness. It is a natural reaction to loss. The Greek word evagrius uses is lupe for grief. Grieving is a necessary part of what it means to live a human life. So grieving is good, sadness is good. For evagrius, the sadness that leads to trouble is a reaction to loss which, in the stillness and isolation of desert life, has got out of perspective and become all-consuming, so that memories for a lost past begin to constitute the person's identity. To get some sense of what evagrius meant by sadness, we should think perhaps of nostalgia or bitter regret. And I just say despondency, because he uses that word too, and most of us know we don't want anyone to ever be despondent, because that's not good. So it's a temptation fueled by memories of the past. These images may or may not be accurate, but whether they are or not, they are still only images, no more than a mental representation. And this is the problem. Because the reality they represent is no longer available, a further wave of sadness follows. This double grief is enervating and exhausting. It diminishes the soul, leaving as a final sting the memory of how deeply the individual soul has poured herself out upon these thoughts of hers. We, like the desert ascetics, can be spiritually harmed if we overindulge in nostalgia for a past that is no more. And I include that because, especially for 2020, I've heard so many people, and we've all thought, gee, I wish things were like they used to be. I wish we had the freedoms that we used to have. And we can idealize that past, which obviously is more attractive than what we're doing with isolation in the present. But we have to guard against that, because if you compare the present to the past or the future in an unfair comparison, then you're going to be robbed from the present gifts that are for you. So in review, do not let the past ruin your present. And keep the faith. Don't let sadness progress to despondency. And make sure that you develop a good sense of humor and that there's hope in your humor, or faith in your humor. Thank you for listening today. The 3 books that I mentioned are What's So Funny About God by Steve Wilkins, 2019. Theology, Comedy, Politics by Marcus Pound, 2019. The 7 Deadly Sins, The Teaching of Evagrius the Hermit by Angela Tilby, 2009. And please, don't be afraid to ask for help. I've struggled with despondency and overcome it. And please reach out. You can email me at nnordine@genesishcs.org if you'd like to talk about this further. And also the Mental Health Recovery Board. Please don't hesitate to email or call them. Take care of yourself. You're the only you've got. God bless.